Hello, and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. Today I'm joined by singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist Jane Sheldon. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell my 5 viewers and my 3 listeners all about you.
Well, I think you're going to have 6 or 7 because at the coffee shop up by my house, I told them I was on this podcast and I said, I met him because he does these amazing memes of Steely Dan. They're like, what is it? And they followed you on Instagram. So
Nice.
you've one more follower.
Excellent.
Yeah, but my name is Jane Sheldon, and I'm like you said, a songwriter, singer. I play many instruments, not all of them fabulously, but I, have fun. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I have a 9-year-old son who is amazing and taking up a lot of time in the best way.
That's a great age.
It's the best, and he was actually able to come. It was the first time he was able to come to a show of mine because I play at bars, and they're late and whatever. So he was able to come to the show that I just did at the Troubadour, and it was very sweet because he was right up at the front. And that was pretty sweet to have.
That's amazing. So let's talk about the Troubadour show. When I saw that you were performing there, I was just blown away. I mean, that place, as you know, just has a wild history. It was sort of one of the places to play in LA in the 60s and 70s, and really even in the 80s, the hair bands kind of took over. So
right, they did. They did.
What was the experience like playing there? What was it like being on that stage?
Well, it was really an incredible place. I mean, I've played a lot of places, but you could just feel I don't think it's really been touched since they opened it. And you could just, it's this just big, beautiful wooden room, and you could just feel all of the history in there, and it sounds great. It really sounds great. It is a great sounding room. And everybody who's played there is like, it just sounds so good up there, and it really did. It was a lot of fun to be there.
That's awesome. I took some time and I went through the Troubadour's website because I think I was just saying this to you before we started recording. There is just so much that has happened there, and so many bands either played legendary shows there or got their start there. So they have this whole great page of sort of a timeline and history of the club. So I figured it'd be fun to go through some of the highlights from the 70s, and we can talk about some of the people that are mentioned.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. So starting in 1970, apparently Don Henley and Glenn Frey from the Eagles met for the first time in the bar at the Troubadour.
Incredible. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I think that's fascinating. I don't know if it's before the Eagles really got started, or obviously before they were meeting for the first time. But I'm not sure where in their careers they were at that time.
Well, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that they both ended up backing up Linda Ronstadt.
Right.
Was the history of the Eagles, right? Like they started they were just players for Linda, and then they decided to go, let's do our thing.
Right.
But I didn't know that they met in that bar.
Yeah, well, according to their website, I guess cool. That's a point of pride. So that's pretty cool. Really cool. Another interesting one, and I think I knew about this one, is Zeppelin played a monster show at the LA Forum that same year. And I guess after the show, they all ended up at the Troubadour, and they got on stage with Fairport Convention and just had this massive jam session for 3 hours.
That's an interesting hybrid. I wouldn't have put those two groups together, but that's great.
Yeah, and they crossed over on, I'm not sure, Robert Plant apparently was a huge Fairport Convention fan, and I know in Battle of Evermore that's Sandy Denny on some of the backing vocals, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I just can't imagine, even in 1970, Zeppelin was huge. Just being there to see Fairport Convention, and all of a sudden, Plant, Page, Bonham, John Paul Jones, they all just kind of wander in, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna go take the stage and have this jam session. That was amazing.
Yeah, fun. I love that when very, very successful musicians will just get up and play anywhere. It's cool.
Definitely. All right, so moving on to 1971. Again, a meeting at the Troubadour that was significant for the future of music. Carly Simon met James Taylor for the first time. And they, of course, got married later and had this great, musical history between the two of them. So,
Indeed.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little bit of a volatile pairing, I think.
Yeah,
But some
for
good
sure.
songs came out of that.
Yes.
I love Carly Simon.
Me too.
Fantastic. I think she's a very underrated songwriter.
I agree. What are your thoughts about James Taylor? I mean, he's obviously a legend, but he's not one of my favorites. I'm not going to lie.
I gotta tell you, I respect him. I think he's not somebody I ever seek out to listen to. He's obviously a great guitar player, and Fire and Rain is a beautifully, it's a classic, and there's just something about his music that doesn't make me, it doesn't draw, it's not compelling to me in the same way as other artists of that era were. So I'm gonna choose Carly Simon over my loyalty.
Me too.
Is Carly Simon.
Team Carly all the way.
Team Carly.
Nice. All right, so moving on to 1975, Miles Davis records his Live at the Troubadour album.
Yeah.
I have to say I'm not super familiar with that. I'm obviously a big Miles fan, but it's one of the albums that I just haven't listened to a whole lot. I mean, I've heard it, but now I'm going to have to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, I haven't heard that record either. I bet that would have been a cool kind of time travel-y thing, right? If you can time travel anywhere, go to that show.
Oh, I would love to be at that show. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And 70s Miles, right? Like mid 70s Miles. So it's like, when did post Bitches Brew, but like before he got into all the weird stuff in the 80s. So I think it might have been a good.
Right.
I'll have to go check the track listing and see what's on there.
Yeah.
All right, 1979, another underrated, I think, singer-songwriter, Ricky Lee Jones, releases Chuck E's In Love, which apparently she wrote about musician and former Troubadour employee Chuck E. Weiss. So there's a connection there.
I didn't know he was connected to the Troubadour at all. Interesting.
Yeah, neither did I. I guess, he must have worked there around that time. And then also in 1979, kind of coming back full circle to the Eagles, they released the song Sad Cafe, which was written about the Troubadour.
Really?
Yeah. Didn't know that either. But
I didn't check their website before I played there. I should have done this. This is all news. This is cool.
Me too. Again, like I knew it had a great history. I knew about a lot of things. Like, Lenny Bruce, I think, was the first person that was sort of notoriety there. But all these other things, I just had no clue. So it's fun. It was fun learning about that today.
That is good. That's good history. Good trivia.
And then
I think several years ago it was on the verge of closing.
Really?
Yeah, it came close, and I'm not sure how it got salvaged, but thankfully it did. It's an important venue to keep alive for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the 80s, and I think we can just skip over that and just say that the hair bands took over, right? That whole thing. But, most notably, I think Metallica and Guns N' Roses played some of their first, shows there. No hate to hair metal, by the way. I was into it for a while.
So speaking of 80s, I guess it would have been... So I was born in 82, and my brother is 10 years older than I am. He's a musician, and he used to play those spots on the Strip, like Club Lingerie and Gazzari's. And so I was a kid. I couldn't go to the shows. My parents were very, very supportive. And so we would go and stand outside those clubs. And I remember being, 7 years old and being outside of like Club Lingerie and Gazzari's and just like the hair and the whole thing, A pretty funny memory.
That's amazing. Another time travel moment would have been like just the Sunset Strip in the 80s, that whole scene,
Yeah. I was there for a little of it.
Yeah, but I mean, even just as an adult, just being there,
Totally.
as a fly on the wall kind of thing, like crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
And then, we could keep going, but one last entry that I noted. In 1991, Pearl Jam, who had been performing under the name Mookie Blaylock up until that point, actually played their first show as Pearl Jam at the Troubadour.
Wasn't Mookie Blaylock, wasn't that some kind of sports player, right?
Yeah, he was a basketball player.
Basketball player, okay. Love it. For what team?
I don't know. I'm not a sports guy.
Great name. So good.
My knowledge of sports is really around how it ties into music and other things, but yeah.
Are you going to watch the Super Bowl?
Well, that I watch every year.
Yeah.
So my wife and my daughter, who's 17, and we have fun with it every year. We make boxes and we do all the side bets, like, how long is the national anthem going to be? Is it going to be less than or greater than 2 minutes? And what color is the Gatorade going to be at the end? We do all that stuff, so we make a fun night out of it.
Is your daughter into Taylor Swift?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got a really great taste in music. Not to say that Taylor Swift isn't great taste, but she's just into so many things. But Taylor's just something that never really resonated with her as much, I don't think.
Okay, so she's not caught up in the whole national consciousness. Is Taylor gonna make it to the Super Bowl? Does she have enough time? Can she get on the plane at 10? Well, I find it it's so fun. It's so funny to me that
it's great.
People are.
And I love how much of an uproar it is, and how people are just getting so upset or happy about it on the other side of things. It's great.
Very polarizing.
It is.
Pretty unbelievable.
I have a feeling some of the side bet stuff this year is going to be all about Taylor. What time is she going to get there? How many times are we going to see her on screen? Is she going to run on the field if they win? Like all that kind of stuff. So
yes and yes and yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be great. So let's talk about your music, which, before we met on Instagram, I wasn't really aware of your music, and now I am, and I have to say I love it. I went back and listened to your first EP. I listened to your recent EP of covers, which I love the title, Somebody Else's Favorite Song, which is obvious.
You get the reference.
Of course, it's FM.
No, but what's so funny is very few people get that reference. I guess they're just, they're not in the Steely Dan world like you and I are. But I'm glad you picked up on that.
And I don't consider FM to be like a deep cut by any means, but I agree there are a surprising number of people who even really like Steely Dan and just don't know that song because it was never released really. It was a single and it was only on the greatest hits albums, and it just sort of didn't hit the consciousness, I guess, for some folks. But yeah, immediately saw that and loved it. And when I saw Bad Sneakers, that's right, no static at all. When I saw Bad Sneakers on your EP, I got excited. And talk to me a bit about how you decided to record that. And, the arrangement is phenomenal. I really like what you did with it.
Thanks. Yeah. So I started collaborating with the person who produced it. His name's Stevie Black. And he's an incredible string arranger by trade. And he's worked with, Miley and Madonna and tons and tons of people. And so he and I started working together, and we've written some songs. And then I was like, what would be like? I just want to do an EP of covers, and I really want to fuck them up. I want to just let's do them so different than the original and just have fun. And it was sort of started as over COVID, so we'd get together in masks and where we could, and just kind of it took a good long time because it was over isolation mostly. But Bad Sneakers, I just was going through the Steely Dan songbook, and I can't remember, it's the sheet music of the first 7 records. Right. And so I would just sit at the piano and play through the songs, and I sort of had the bare bones piano idea, and it was a little bit faster, and Stevie was like, let's slow it down. And we slowed it down, and we just wanted it to be very kind of simple piano, string quartet, and sort of take it to a different emotional place than the original does. I'm really proud of how that one turned out. That might be my favorite off of that record. I'm very proud of that one.
As you should be. It's great, and I love and the strings are so great because, like you said, it sort of sets the mood and it gives it a whole different vibe. And most notably, Steely Dan didn't really use strings in any of their recorded songs, right? I think "Through with Buzz" is the only one that has strings.
I think there's one more. I don't remember which track it is, but yes, "Through with Buzz" is an incredible string arrangement. I can't remember He's a famous string arranger. I can't remember his name, but yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to, if I ever get to talk to Fagan, I'd like to ask him why didn't they use more strings? I guess they didn't have to.
That's a good way of putting it. They didn't have to. They did do some string arrangements for other artists, which was funny. Like, some of the early Brill Building stuff, and they were, brought in to do arrangements for Jay and the Americans,
Right.
and some of the other bands and stuff that they didn't necessarily record, even not on their own songs. But, how do you do horn and string arrangements all that time and then just not bring it into your own music? I guess, like you said, they just didn't have to because everything else was so great.
It was a very cool sound. I mean, they certainly used horns. But yeah, it's an interesting choice that they really did not go there. And I love a good string section on a rock track.
Me too.
Yeah.
So keeping that Steely Dan connection alive with the recording process, Lenise Bent, hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that happen?
So Lenise and Stevie, the producer, go way back. And it just was a sort of a natural idea of like, you know what, let's see if Lenise wants to mix this one. And so Stevie sent her a rough and she loved it. And she said, yes, yes, yes. And she put her magic on it. And she had great ideas of like, when to bring in the violin and when to pull it out. And she really brought it to a whole new level. And she's such a cool person.
Yes.
She had a lot of stories, which I won't share, but it was special to work with her and have her on this as this, full circle Steely Dan moment.
Amazing. I'm lucky enough that she followed my stupid meme page on Instagram.
That's so great.
And she's liked a few things, and every time she does, I'm like, I get giddy, I laugh. I'm like, oh, Lenise Bent liked my meme. This is awesome, it just makes my whole day.
Yeah.
Yeah, super cool.
No, she's cool. She's really got she's got quite a resume of who she's worked with, and she doesn't have any airs about her either. She's a really, really cool person. I like her a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
So the other song that stood out on the EP is the I Want You to Want Me, which, goes in a completely different direction than the original. Love it. How did you decide to take this sort of, I don't want to say bubblegum pop, but like, Cheap Trick was so upbeat and peppy and happy for most of their hits in the 70s. And, I would never think of that song in a minor key, really slowed down with the string section. Like, you made it into sort of a sad love song, right? As opposed to like I guess which it was originally, I guess, but the music sort of masks that feeling that you get from the lyrics, right? Unless you really overanalyze it. And I never had, I guess. And then when I heard your version, I was like, wow, that's not a happy song.
Yeah, I think I said when I posted it, I don't know if it's still up there, but I think I said, some songs, like People Are Sad, you just have to get them alone in a room. And that song is like, I heard it and I was like, I started listening to the lyrics and it's a really sad song, I want you to want me, I want you to need me, I'd love you to love me. It's a song of longing and mourning and wanting. And so I just kind of just sat with it at the piano again. And, yeah, it just came to me as a totally different idea of let's make this a song of unrequited love, piano, string quartet, just simple. It was obvious, actually. It was like this obvious thing. Once I started doing it, I was like, this is how this song should be. Not to say that the original is great. It's so fun and poppy and immediately it comes on and you start shaking your body and popping, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you hear your version, you sit and cry.
Yeah. You're like, I don't want to kill myself now.
I love it.
Thanks. That was a fun one. His strings too on that I think are so gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The strings are fantastic. So let's just sort of maybe stay in the Steely Dan world for a bit. So I know just from reading your bio on your website and stuff that, your dad played you a lot of music growing up, as did mine, although my dad was really more into older classic stuff and not necessarily rock and roll as much. He was a little older. So I got a completely different sort of world growing up between his music, and then my mom came up in sort of the same era, but then my brother and sister, who were 11 and 13 years older than me, kind of like your brother. So
Yeah.
I got this whole sort of generational leap of music growing up, which sort of shaped my musical taste. But what are your earliest memories of hearing Steely Dan? What initially attracted you to them? What are some of your favorite songs? Let's do that.
I can tell you exactly what happened to me with Steely Dan. So yes, like you, my father was musical. My brother was 10 years older, and so there was a lot of more sophisticated stuff playing in the house. And my dad was a big Steely Dan fan, and it was on in the house, and it was like it was just sort of a background thing. And then I started to drive when I was 16. My parents had a Ford Taurus, and it had a cassette deck. And I was driving around by myself in Santa Monica, where I grew up, and my dad had left a cassette of Katie Lied in the tape deck. And so I was like, all right, I should give this a shot. And at that time, I was, I started playing guitar. I think I was maybe 13, and I was into Nirvana, and sort of the bands of that time, Hole, and I learned how to play guitar just listening to those records and just figuring out the bar chords and stuff. So
Sure.
I had that under my belt. So I was driving around, and this Katie Lied was in the tape deck, and I was like, I'm gonna just give this a go. And I turned it on, and it was set to "Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More" was the track that it was on, and I just hadn't heard anything like that song before. That and the guitar lick was so cool.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
like, what is this? I don't know what this is, but I really like it. It got me immediately. And so I think I rewound that song a few times. And then I started listening to that record, and I was blown away by those songs. And I just was like, okay, give me more. Dad, I need more. I was in. After that, I was just like, I need more. And I think the next record I went to was Pretzel Logic.
Okay.
And then I just was all in from
Right.
that moment. So 16 on. Maybe 17. 16, 17 on it was all about Steely Dan. And I still have never, I never get sick of those records. I always go back to them and hear something new. And something will catch my, I'll hear a lyric differently. Or a guitar phrase or piano, it really just keeps on giving.
They do. Those albums are, you nailed it. I mean, like, even still, I'll listen to stuff and hear something I hadn't heard before, or just some phrase or something will hit me a different way. And I do a lot of listening in the car, which is not the best environment to hear all the nuance in music. So recently I've been trying to listen with headphones, and really focus, just to kind of, again, revisit some of the songs that I love and hear new things, and I still do. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's probably, the best recorded music of all time. Just in terms of sonically, how it sounds, and all of the nuances and the time and the energy and the production and the money and records like that will never be made again.
Right. That's true. And it's funny that you had Katie Lied as your first exposure. I think mine was as a kid. I had a little record player, one of the old 70s models that was like a little suitcase that opened up and then, right? And my sister, who worked in radio, would always give me whatever records that she got as promos, and they didn't want or they had duplicates of or what have you. So I remember one of my earliest memories of playing my own records on that record player was Josie by Steely Dan. I don't think it was in 77 when it came out. It might have been a few years after, so I was probably 7 or 8 years old. But even at 7, 8 years old, that song just grabbed me. The guitars and the drums and just the rhythm and the words that I had no idea what the hell they were talking about as a kid. You know what I mean? Shine up the battle apple.
Hats and Hooters.
Yeah, right, exactly. What the hell's a battle apple? Joe, would you love to scrapple?
I still don't know what a battle apple is.
It's a made-up word, but it just, why not, right?
Yeah.
And then, I think Asia was in the zeitgeist at that time, and Gaucho, so I think I picked some of that up again just from, my sister and from hearing it on the radio. Hey 19 was a current, when I was that age. And kind of didn't really get the bug for Steely Dan until I was probably, like you, somewhere in my mid to late teens, and Katie Lied was kind of the gateway drug for me. I heard Dr. Wu, and that just blew me away. I used to play saxophone, so the sax solo in that is just aces, and it sort of led me to sort of be like, okay, let me listen to the rest of this album and see what other songs I like on it. And I love the whole thing. And like you, I kind of then went, I knew of Asia and Gaucho, like I said, so I went back and explored those further. And then went backwards and did Pretzel Logic and the first 2 albums and everything else. And since then, it's just been, in regular rotation.
Yeah. Yeah. Does your family partake in your Steely Dan love?
Unfortunately, no. I'm not gonna say my wife's a hater, but every once in a while she's like, "Dude, can you listen to something else?"
You're like, no, I really can't.
I do, and the funny thing is, I do. I listen to so much other stuff. I mean, it's just I think that my focus the last few years again has been Steely Dan. I'm in that phase right now. My daughter. It's funny, she isn't really into them yet. I'm hoping to just sort of, subvert her and make her a Steely Dan fan. But I was playing stuff in the living room, a while back, and I think she thinks she doesn't know a lot of Steely Dan songs, but songs were coming on, and she was like, I know that song. So I was like, okay, good. At least she knows it and can recognize it, so that makes me happy.
Yeah, it sort of creeped into the subconscious, and then maybe later on in her life, she'll be like, you know what? I want that. I'm going to listen to that again.
Yeah, I think she will.
The foundation, and then, yeah.
I think she will. So what are your, besides, Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More, which I love that you put that on the playlist that you made for me, and we'll talk about the playlist in a bit. Some other standout tracks for you. Like, I know people ask me that all the time because, they think I'm a huge Steely Dan nerd, and I am, but I don't have a permanent, I don't like to rank things anyway, but I don't really have a permanent top list. It's just the stuff that I'm into right now, right? Like there's the Steely Dan catalog kind of revolves through my listening habits, I guess.
I always say my favorite song, Steely Dan song, is the one that I'm listening to. Right?
Right.
Whichever one I'm listening to.
For sure.
But you know what? Which song I've been sort of going... Well, I love Pixeline. I feel like that's sort of a deeper cut that people don't... the last 2 records sort of get dismissed, I think, by a lot of Dan heads. And I go back to Pixeline a lot. I just feel like that song's cool. It's just weird. And it does it for me. I love the opening line. The I'm in a boot squeezes off 20 tracer rounds. Just weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that song too.
And that's when she jumps the turnstile.
It's such intrigue, some of the lyrics. They draw you in with that opening line, and then they just take you on this wild ride, through this character or this sort of vignette, if you will, Yes.
Absolutely. I don't think you can't take away those lyrics from the music. They're both like right at level with one another in terms of sophistication and interest. And it's not really about, people always, I see on these groups, like people are trying to dissect what the songs are about. And I think it misses the point. I think it's about the feeling. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. It's just pulling you in. It's painting with words. It's visuals and creepy characters that are in the seedy underbelly. And I heard somebody describe it. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said euphoric failure.
I love that.
Euphoric failure.
Have you seen the Quantum Criminals book?
I've seen it. I have not picked it up. I know very little about it. Have you read it?
I got a copy for Christmas this year and I read it. I was holding off when it came out. I was sort of torn because as much as I love to just absorb everything Steely Dan, and I was looking forward to reading the prose part of it, I was a little bit taken aback by the fact that somebody painted pictures of all these different characters and scenes
like
and things.
Hoops McCann.
Yeah, because I feel like it was just going to ruin it for me because, you know, listening to them for 40-something years, I kind of have preconceived notions in my head of what these things look like. And like you said, like the lyrics and the music, they kind of paint a picture for me. So to see somebody else's interpretation is fine, but I'm just like, I don't know if I agree with any of them. And the paintings are fabulous. Joan LeMay, who did all the artwork, she's an amazing painter. Like, not to take anything away from her art, but there are just some representations that I was like, really? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's sort of when your favorite book becomes a movie.
Right.
And it's never going to be as good as how your brain has made it for you.
Exactly. So that's a good... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of my favorite books is A Confederacy of Dunces.
Yes.
And that has the history of, they've tried to make that into a movie for decades and decades, and it always fails. It falls through in development. I think they say now that it's cursed. But I'm kind of glad. I'm like, please never make this into a movie. It will never be as good as the book in any capacity. It just couldn't be. It's such an amazing piece of literature.
Oh, I agree. And there are some things that shouldn't cross into other sorts of media, right? And I feel like a couple examples for me is that they tried a couple times to make The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy into a movie, failed miserably. One of my favorite books. On the less cerebral side, there's a series of books called the Jack Reacher series. I don't know if you're familiar.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so great books, well written, but they're spy, military, police, crime type novels, and they're great. I've been reading, I can't think of the author's name off the top of my head, which is alarming because I just literally heard it yesterday. Anyway, it'll come to me. So I just love those books, and a bunch of years ago, they made one of the books into a movie. And in the books, they describe Jack Reacher as being like 6'5", 270 pounds, like this massive guy with like baseball mitts for hands, and he's just like this total badass. And they cast Tom Cruise. Even with elevator shoes, Gaucho reference, even with elevator shoes, Tom just didn't do it for me. It literally ruined. So, I mean, I watched the two movies that they made, and I just sort of hate watched them. I was like, this sucks, the whole way through. So fast forward to, I guess it was a couple of years ago, Amazon optioned another one of the books to make a series, and I was like, oh, here we go again. But they cast this guy, Alan Ritchson, and he fits the description, like he is Reacher. So, they redeemed themselves, or the author redeemed himself by by insisting that they get somebody who actually looks like what Reacher should be. But it was the same kind of thing. It was like you have this picture in your head and this great description of this character in all these novels, and like all of a sudden, you go to the movies and you sit down and it's like, Tom Cruise, really?
Jack Reacher, The Search for More Money.
Pretty much. Well, great. So let's, if you wouldn't mind, let's pivot a bit. I loved listening to your first EP and some of your other singles that were on Spotify. I have to say that, like, your music, your originals, you sound like Southern California. I hear so much of that influence. Beach Boys, Joni, I hear some Tom Petty. I get strong 70s vibes. Mm-hmm. So what's your writing process? Where did some of those songs come from? I think I have a good sense of your influences, but maybe you can, list some for my 6 or 7 viewers now.
We're growing. We're going to grow.
All right.
my process is kind of different for each song. I don't have any sort of specific thing of like, this is how I write. But usually I will come up with the music first, and then I'll hear a melody in my head, and then I'll sort of get a little nugget of something, and it's kind of like cracking a code, So it's like, okay, I have this part, but now I have to go, how do I want to start this? Or how do I want to, where does this want to go? And sometimes it's really easy. That's always the best, when it's just like, okay, I have this idea and I'm going to flush it out, and it just pours out of you. That's very rare, but it's great when it happens. But it's rare, and I have songs that I've been working on for years. I call it snippets disease, where you'll get like a you'll get a snippet of something, and then you can't crack the code, and it just is like, oh, I'm trying to get better about finishing it. Even if it's not a good song, even if it's not good, it's done, and that's, it's a song. It's complete. So I'm trying to like get out of my head in that way of just like actually finishing the idea, even if it's not perfect, But I wrote this song. So I have a 9-year-old now, and we took him to Disneyland. This was maybe 6 years ago, and we went on Small World. And he came home and he was singing the Small World song, but he inverted the line. He said, after all, it's a small world. After all, it's a small world. And I was like, that's I like that. And so I wrote a song around that inversion. So the chorus is, after all, it's a small, small world. After all, it's a small, small world. And it's sort of the idea of like, you can't outrun this relationship.
Right.
You've done all these things, you've gone all these places, but you can't outrun it, right? And so it hits the choruses, after all, it's a small, small world. So sometimes I'll get ideas of songs just through things that happen, and I'm like, that's a lyric, that's a concept, that's cool, let's run with that. Or if it's a co-write, then it's whole, that's a whole other animal. Somebody will bring you a chord progression, and then I'll have a top line idea or something, or vice versa, and it becomes its own alchemy. I've written a lot with my brother. My brother and I were in a band together for a decade. We're in a band called American Bloomers, and he's an incredible songwriter. He's really one of my favorite singer-songwriters. He's just that good. So he's always been a pleasure to write with.
I listened to some of that too.
There's a thing when you're writing with a family member too, where it's like sometimes you'll write with people and you have to be delicate because it's
Right.
their soul, it's their idea. But like when you're writing with your brother, you're just like, no, that's bad. Like, no, I don't like that idea. And the relationship remains.
Right. That's Well, I mean, siblings is a whole different thing. And I was gonna ask you about that. Like, what was that like? Did he pull the big brother card a lot and say, we're doing it this way because I'm older, or did you guys have a better? How did you sort of work out that sort of stuff as you were writing together and recording together?
Yeah. So the first entry into recording, I think I was 16 or 17, and he wrote these songs and produced a record. It was like maybe a 3 or 4 song EP, and we recorded with David Bearwald at his studio in Venice. David was he's an amazing singer-songwriter, and he had this beautiful studio in Venice. He co-wrote Strong Enough with Sheryl Crow.
Oh wow, okay.
He's an incredible musician. So we recorded it at his studio, and it's actually funny because the piano player on that demo, when I was 16 or 17, played piano on the Linger cover that I just did. So it's like kind of this cool full circle thing, But my brother's always been he has a vision, he can hear something, and he's good at kind of parsing things out and getting to that thing that he's hearing in his head pretty quickly. And he's also diplomatic and very easygoing, and he's a good guy.
Nice. So you've also had a song featured on a TV show, and you had a really cool Christmas song, which I listened to and then realized there was a video for, so I went and watched that. I was like binging Jane Sheldon this morning before we got on the podcast. So why don't you tell me about those two and how those came about?
Yeah, Yeah. So the Christmas song, I think that everybody like a song. You reach a certain point when, as a songwriter, where you're like, I think I should write a Christmas song. It's like, I think I'm gonna write a Christmas song, and I was, there's just thousands of songs about Santa, but there's very few about Mrs. Claus, and I was like, let's give her some representation. She deserves a little credit for her contribution to this whole operation. And so I
Indeed.
had this idea of like, this is going to be about Mrs. Claus, and it's Christmas Eve, and she's done all this work, and now gets to celebrate. So she goes to a bar, and the celebration is about her. Like, let's raise a drink to Mrs. Claus and set up a double jack. This one's for Mrs. Claus tonight. And so I think that's how I thought about it. Is like, I wanted it to feel kind of like a Springsteen song in a way of like, you're at a bar and you're live, and it's like, set up a double jack. This one's for Mrs. Claus. And then the video was really awesome. Terry Hatcher's a friend, and she agreed to play Mrs. Claus in the video, and a lot of other friends sort of stepped up and helped, and we took over a bar in Atwater Village, and Matt Ryan, who's an amazing DP, he filmed it, and it was just it was a really fun project to bring that video to life.
It's a fun video. I enjoy
The
it.
puppets too.
Yeah, I love the puppets.
Yeah, amazing.
I will link the video in the show notes for this episode too.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And then your song that was in a TV show.
Oh, yeah. So I've had a couple of songs. The American Bloomers songs were in a couple episodes of The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the latest placement was Nancy Drew. And that was a song called Go Quietly that I wrote with Alan White, he's an amazing songwriter. He's Morrissey's co-writer. He's written, I think, 60 or 70 songs with Morrissey. So like all those great Morrissey songs, like We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful, and First of the Gang to Die. He wrote those songs. So I've known him for many years, and we just collaborated, and that luckily got placed in that show, which was wonderful.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
So next on my list of things to talk about, you sent me this fabulous playlist. Not only did I love most of the songs on it, but I feel like I didn't know some of the others, and I'm a little embarrassed because I think they're album cuts, like Masoko Tango by the Police, great song, but like, when do you ever intentionally put that song on? Maybe you do, but I don't think I ever have. It's just like it plays if I'm listening to the whole album. And the standout, and we messaged about this, and it was awesome, was, you said no particular order, but yet you kicked off the playlist with Easy Lover by Phil Collins and Philip Bailey. And that is a kick-ass opening track for a playlist, I just realized. And it's an instant put me in a good mood track. It's like brain bleach. Like, you listen to that song, you just can't be in a bad mood.
You can't.
Yeah.
No.
Well, so tell me about some of the songs on the playlist and why you included them, maybe, or just what are you listening to right now? Like, what are some of the tracks that you're playing on repeat?
Okay. Well, I will tell you, in my house, my son is obsessed with Hamilton right now.
Nice.
Hamilton, the musical. And I ignored it for several years because I was like, there's no way that this is as good as everybody says it is. There's no way. And I kind of just didn't, I don't know, I didn't go see it, and I didn't listen to it. And then my son went through a big Weird Al Yankovic Weird Al Yankovic phase. And Weird Al does this polka medley of Hamilton.
Oh, wow.
It's
I haven't.
incredible.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible. And so that was the gateway, because it was this medley of these Hamilton songs. And then he wanted to listen to the original recording. And I was like, all right, let's go for it. And then he became obsessed with it. So that has been on repeat. Like, at the top, my Spotify best of, or whatever the 2020 they're most listened to, is the Hamilton Broadway cast recording, which is, by the way, it's every bit as good as everybody says.
Oh, it is 1,000%.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. I didn't put any of that on the playlist, but that's been a big big listen over here. But I think we talked about New York City Serenade, which I put on the playlist.
Yeah.
And that's actually, when I was recording Bad Sneakers, I was thinking about that song a lot. Just sort of like the emotional, that sort of the outro. I kind of wanted the outro of Bad Sneakers to have that same emotional content that New York City Serenade had. And it's a song I go back to over and over again. It's 10 minutes long, which is right. Like, it's an incredible feat to make a piece of music that is 10 minutes long, that is not boring.
Yes.
That is the opposite of boring. It's completely compelling in every second of it. And that's a song I never get sick of and never will.
Same. I think it's one of my absolute favorite Springsteen songs. It's that album is one of his best, I think, especially as a singer-songwriter. I mean, just as a songwriter even. People hate on Bruce, and look, I'm from Jersey. I grew up in Jersey. I used to hate on Bruce.
Hometown hero.
Hometown hero, but like Born in the USA and all that stuff. I mean, it was just like, okay, it was like beaten to death in New Jersey, obviously, right? So by the time, and that was when I was in my formative music years, I guess. So it wasn't until much later, probably in college, there was a really great used record store in the town where I went to school, and I forgot how I ended up with it, but I got a cassette of Darkness on the Edge of Town. Mm-hmm. And I think somebody that I was friends with at school recommended it, and I was like, Springsteen, really? And they're like, just listen to it. So I bought it for like $3 in the used bin or something, and I threw it in the tape deck in my car and just used to just drive around and be doing nothing or whatever, listening to it. And I was just like, wow, I had no idea he had that kind of depth, and then of course that led me backwards into Wild Innocent and East Street Shuffle and Greetings from Asbury Park and the golden era, as I think of it, of Bruce. I mean, it was just amazing.
Yeah, he and the band, I mean, yeah, they're probably in my, if not my top 5, my top 10 for sure.
Yeah, great. And the other standout track, I think, I'm looking around my microphone, Say So by Doja Cat. That was sort of like a left field, but, tell me why that made it on the cut.
I love her. She's so great. She's really one of my favorite artists to come out of the past, I guess, 5 years maybe. I just think she writes really good songs, and they're fun and catchy and hooky, and she can rap really well, and I think she's dope.
Yeah, me too.
I love that song.
Me too. First exposure was, every TikTok for like 6 months. That song is the music, and my daughter would show me TikToks, and I'm like, why does everybody have that song? And she's like, it's a great song. And then I was like, okay. So I listened to the whole thing, and I was like, wow, you're right. This is a great song.
It's a great song.
Yeah. It's funny how I've tried to get my daughter into stuff, and I've made her playlists, and I play stuff for her in the car all the time, and give her recommendations. But I think it's been both ways since she's been about 12 or 13, and she's really started to get into music on her own. Just the amount of things that she's gotten me into, and artists that she's played for me, and even things that I listened to when they were out 10, 20 years ago that she's discovered sort of sparks like a re-interest, if you will, for that kind of stuff for me too, which has been fun.
That's really fun. That's cool. That's great that you guys can share that bond.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. She's really into Radiohead, and she likes Smashing Pumpkins, and the other day we were in the car and she was playing a playlist, and it was 90% like 90s alternative, and I was like, what what year is this? Did I fall into a time machine? Like, this is great.
The 90s are having this renaissance because it was so long ago,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
do you have a favorite Smashing Pumpkins record?
Siamese Dream, hands down. They were on the verge of breaking up, I think. It was like just the most angsty time in the band, and it shows, and Billy Corgan was just working around the clock, doing hundreds of overdubs and playing all the parts, and almost Steely Dan level obsession over the studio process and how things are recorded. With Butch Vig, by the way, engineering and producing, and the guitar sounds on that record, and just some of the atmospherics, the playing. Jimmy Chamberlain's one of my favorite drummers.
He's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my top 10 favorite albums ever. How about you?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to say Melancholy and the Infinite
Okay.
Sadness, just because it's a nostalgia thing for me. I was maybe 14 or 15 or something when that record came out, and it just kind of brings me to that time immediately.
Right.
And just sitting with the liner notes and that double album, and there's just something about that record that I have to tip it to that one.
I heartily endorse that, and I think that record got a lot of undeserved shit because it was a double album. Nobody was doing double albums at that point, and I think he wanted to do a triple, Billy, and everybody was like, "You can't, let's be realistic here. Let's keep it at a double." And I think he finally backed down and agreed to it. But I think he had all this music in him that he wanted to get out, and that record just runs the gamut from screaming heavy metal riffs to just gorgeous strings and pianos, and it's unreal. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think that's my second favorite.
Yeah.
There was a time when I would have said Gish, because that was my first exposure to the band. It's funny, I have a friend, hi Amy, if you're ever watching this. Amy and I used to just turn each other on to music. That was our thing. And I remember distinctly the first time I heard the Pumpkins, I was picking her up. We were going somewhere to hang out or go out to eat or something. And she jumped in my car and she popped out whatever tape I had in the tape deck, and she put a tape in. I said, "What are you putting in?" And she goes, "Shh, just listen. Just this shit's gonna blow your mind. Just listen." And it was I Am One, which is the opening track on Gish. And I was like, holy shit. Oh my God, I was just blown away by the music. I'm like, "Who is this?" And she's like, "Some new band called Smashing Pumpkins. I don't know." She goes, "It's really good." And I was like, "Yeah, it's really good." Yeah, it was one of those musical moments,
Yeah, that you remember.
for sure.
Are you into Joni Mitchell at all?
I am. I like Blue. I like Court and Spark. I like Hejira, Hissing of Summer Lawns, Coyote.
Yeah.
Some of the classics.
I remember I had a moment with Blue. The first time I heard Blue, I was at my friend Lori's house, and she had the CD, and we were probably 13, and had a Discman. I think I brought over a Discman to the sleepover or whatever, and I found that record, and I just was listening to it. And the first track, All I Want, and the same kind of Steely Dan moment of what is?
Yes.
I've been waiting to hear this my whole life. I've been waiting to hear this. That's still one of my absolute favorite records.
Yeah, love it. I'd never really dug into her whole catalog. I think I was more of a hits kind of person, but definitely just love her voice and love her songwriting. Let me see. So on my playlist recently, I'll give you a few things that I've been listening to. I have been obsessed with the song Angel of the Morning, but not the Juice Newton version, the original by Evie Sands. I listen to almost every genre, everything from hip hop to country to metal to Steely Dan and yacht rock and classic rock and alternative. You name it, I can get into it. But I think classic country for the last few years, and even some Americana stuff and some of the Southern California country rock really has sort of made a reappearance in my listening. So I heard the Juice Newton version, and I didn't know that it was a cover. I never knew that. So I forgot how I stumbled across the original version. I think maybe when I went and searched on Spotify, because I was going to throw it on my playlist, and I think the other version came up right next to it, and I was like, oh, somebody covered Angel of the Morning, and I looked at the date.
And that was the original?
1967, Evie Sands. And she wasn't even the first one to have a hit with it. Somebody else, somebody Merrily, I think was her name, had the first hit version of it on the radio the next year or the year after, and then Juice resurrected it and was it 80, 81. So that's been in rotation. Are you familiar with Letters to Cleo?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So love them, always love their stuff. You know, they kind of got buried in that deluge of 90s alternative bands, but you know, it's really hard not to have a crush on Kay Hanley. She's just awesome. And they did like a reunion EP in 2016, and the single from that EP is called Four Leaf Clover, and it's like the perfect 3-minute pop rock song. So again, I'll send you a playlist and I'll link all the stuff in the show notes and stuff.
I think
but you should definitely check it out.
Didn't they cover I Want You to Want Me?
Yes, they did. It's funny, they got a lot of notoriety for their covers. They did that. They did Dangerous Type by the Cars, and they did another cover that ended up in a movie, I think. So they had that moment of like, you know, 90s pop rock punk band covers, you know, 70s classic rock kind of stuff. Sister Havana by Urge Overkill.
Okay, I don't know that song.
They were, again, kind of great band out of Chicago. They were, I don't want to say lost in the shuffle, but they were sort of in the middle of the whole grunge thing. They weren't grunge. They were more just straightforward rock and roll, but such a good song.
They did the cover, it was on the Pulp Fiction soundtrack. Didn't they cover Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, that's a great cover.
It's a fantastic cover. And that whole album, Saturation, is great if you haven't heard it. And then finally, a track that my daughter played incessantly for a few months and got me hooked on it, Doomsday by Lizzie McAlpine.
Okay. I don't know that.
Worth checking out. She's a young singer, songwriter, and this song is kind of like a dirge. It's just great. Really spooky and sad, and you know, I'll let you listen to it. I won't give you too much on it. Yeah.
Cool. That's a good eclectic mix. I think a playlist should be run the gamut of all different genres. You know.
It should, and like you said, you know, my favorite song is the one I'm listening to, right? And I think that's what's happening with me lately. Is like I'll just and having Spotify is such a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing because everything at your fingertips. Bad thing because everything at your fingertips. It's like hard to focus and listen to something all the way through because you can just jump to anything.
Kind of dead, unfortunately, but
I know, and it's sad because, you know, growing up when we did, it's you know, the album was the thing. Like you wanted to listen to the whole thing start to finish, and you know, a lot of artists really put a whole lot of thought and effort into sequencing and, you know, making things flow, and you have this whole thematic journey, you know.
Absolutely.
You don't get that anymore.
No, mine is vinyl. I mean, that's a whole other world. But yeah, most artists, you know, can't afford to press. Most indie artists can't afford to do a run of vinyl.
Right.
It's very expensive, and but I think people are still committed to it, and that's a fun thing. You're like, okay, I'm going to put on a side of a record right now, right? You're making a decision. There's a thing with streaming where you're just like, you know, it's the scroll, right? So we're all addicted to that scroll. We're like, okay, what's the next thing? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When you have a vinyl record, you're just like, okay, I'm putting on a side of a record, and we're going to do this for 20 minutes or whatever it is, and you're committed. And I think there's something, you know, important in that.
Yeah, you're paying attention. You're I mean, even if you're not paying rapt attention, you're focusing on the music, right? You're not just skipping around, and you know, it's not just a background kind of thing. So
yeah, or you don't have that desire of the scroll. You don't have the finger thing where you're just like on the screen and you're, you know, what else is out there? What else is in this universe? Like you've made a decision, right? You've made a decision. And
conscious listening, yeah.
No, conscious listening. I like that.
Great. Well, Jane, this has been great. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to cover or anything you wanted to plug before we wrap it up.
I don't think so. I think everybody should go check out your meme page, Memes of the Dan. That's how we got to know each other. It's making Steely Dan memes. I look forward to seeing what the next one you have up your sleeve. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the endorsement and the love. The next one is actually, I made one a couple days ago, and I was like debating whether I should post it or not, but I think I'm going to. So it's going to be a pretzel. It's going to be a Pretzel Logic reference.
I can't wait. If I have any ideas, I'm going to send you my ideas.
Please do.
I think of them all the time.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been really great having you on the podcast. Love
For
talking to
having me.
you. Absolutely. And hopefully you'll come back and visit us again when we have 9 or 10 followers.
Love it. Will do.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
All
bye.
right. Bye.